We're joined by Representative Nancy Mace, who serves the 1st District of South Carolina. She is the chair of the Oversight Subcommittee on Cybersecurity, Information Technology, and Government Intervention. And she's also a member of the Armed Services Committee. Representative Mace, thanks for joining us.
Good morning, and thank you for having me today.
Thank you for joining us and giving us your time. Ms., you've said a lot of things over the last few weeks concerning the issue of abortion, but can we start with how you specifically view abortion personally?
Yes, and I would say I've been a strong voice on this issue for actually the last few years. I was a state lawmaker in South Carolina when different states were doing fetal heartbeat bills, and I believe at the time in 2019 we were the first state in the nation to have a heartbeat bill with exceptions for rape and incest because I put them in there. And so this is an issue that I've been working on for quite some time before I ever came to Congress. And I'm a victim of rape. I was raped at the age of 16. And have tried to be as strong a voice as I can be for other victims and survivors like myself. And so when it comes to the issue of abortion, I am pro-life, number one. But number two, I also see the need to find some common ground, in particular after the overturning of Roe v. Wade. I saw an entire tide change after Roe v. Wade, not just with pro-choice people and constituents that I have in my district, but with pro-life folks as well. And so I've been fighting for exceptions for rape and incest, life of the mother, abnormalities, fetal abnormalities that would not allow women to be able to procreate in the future, would affect her reproductivity in the future, and those really sort of common sense sort of things. And, you know, to me, it's sort of strange that because I'm such a strong advocate on those issues and finding some middle ground, that I often get attacked for taking that position, which is just bizarre to me. But I've been working on that for a long time. And one of the other messages in legislation I've been working on since overturning Roe v. Wade is this issue of access to contraception. Is something that Republicans by and large turned their back on last year. I was only one of 8 Republicans last summer that voted for a pro-contraception bill for women. Number one, if we're going to ban abortion in states, we've got to make sure that every single woman has access to birth control. In South Carolina, for example, we have 14 counties that don't have a single OBGYN doctor. So it's going to be a little more difficult for those women in rural areas, not just in South Carolina, but across the country. And so just really taking a common sense approach to that sort of issue. If we're going to if we're going to ban abortions in states, then what are we doing to improve adoption services? I did a bill that would show the conservative family planning side of things and making sure that women have access to adoption services, that they have legal resources, medical resources, prenatal care, health care, monetary resources, that they know where those resources are if they do have an unwanted pregnancy and want to give their baby up for adoption. What are we going to do with the children who are unwanted? Foster care has to be a part of the Republican plan, especially in states that ban abortion. And so there are all these things that we can be doing. Nurses, OBGYN nurses, midwives, birthing centers in rural areas. There's just all these things we can be doing that show that we're pro-life, but we're also pro-woman. But I'll tell you, I'm kind of the only one talking about it, which is strange to me.
Well, one of some of the words that I guess over the headlines that I've read over the interviews you've done is that if you take a middle of the road position, is there an extreme position that you think your party is taking, and what is that position?
Well, I think there are extremes in both cases. And if you look at Roe, for example, and a lot of people may not realize, but that allowed for abortion up until birth for any reason, really. And that's not where people are. Not to say that it was happening every day to thousands of children every day. That's not what was going on either. But that's what it allowed for. On the other side of things, on the far right, you have people that don't want any exceptions for rape or incest or any other reason. You have people who've vocalized publicly that they don't want women to have access to birth control. In my home state of South Carolina, just a few weeks ago, there were 21 state lawmakers. Not only did they think about it, they drafted a bill and then they filed it, and it was a bill that would charge women for murder if they had an abortion, which would mean the death penalty in the state of South Carolina. So some of the things that we hear about, we've also heard about state lawmakers that some want to ban women from traveling out of state. Well, we do have Article 4 of the Articles of Confederation that say that anyone can travel across state lines. Like, what are you talking about? And so some of the ideas that we've heard and have percolated, not at just the state and local level, but to the national level, it's insane. And that is not what's going to win over female constituents or male at this point. We're losing a lot of support on this issue because of some of the crazy headlines that we see by a very small fraction of people within our party.
How do you think the current legal status of the abortion drug that's currently at the Supreme Court has shaded the conversation about abortion?
Well, my speaking out against that ruling certainly was eye-opening for me. I mean, you had two opposite rulings. You can't follow both of them. One of them has to be ignored, right? And so, you know, I opposed the decision. It was a hand-picked case with a hand-picked judge. And this is a drug, it's not just an abortion pill. It is a medication that is FDA approved. It's prescribed by doctors for women who are also suffering miscarriages, who want to avoid having to have surgery. It's also used in cancer treatments. It's used for rare diseases like Cushing's disease. And so there's a larger part of the story here. And the other side of it, too, is that this activist judge, unelected judge, made this decision and it turned it into basically a federal ban at that point. But this unelected judge shouldn't be making decisions about FDA-approved medication that went through this process 23 years ago. But he used as the basis for his decision, at least in part, a law called the Comstock Act from 1800 something that was ruled unconstitutional by the U.S. Supreme Court in 1983. And so the basis for his ruling was entirely unconstitutional. And I think, you know, we've got to make that delineation here. And the other thing that I want to say about that ruling is that when President Trump was president, there were plenty of Republicans that wanted to ignore activist judges when they ruled against President Trump. And so it shouldn't be a surprise that someone on either side wants to ignore a ruling that they disagree with. And, you know, that's the way this goes. And I want to be a strong voice for common sense and for finding that middle ground. And there's a story I want to share if I have a moment. But I get a lot of mail and letters and emails and phone calls on this issue. Although I'm in South Carolina, my district is the most competitive seat in the state. It's very purple. And after Roe v. Wade was overturned, before that, we were at like very mildly pro-choice, 51%-ish. After overturning Roe v. Wade, our district went to the vast majority, over 60% of residents, whether they're Republican or Democrat or independent, becoming pro-choice after Roe was overturned. I saw pro-life constituents decide that they didn't want the heavy hand of government intervening on this very personal, very sensitive issue, even though they consider themselves pro-life. But I got an email a few weeks ago from a constituent on this issue. She said she's no longer a Republican because of it. She's an independent voter now, and she's pro-choice. And she said her gestational limitations were 14 weeks. She thinks that abortion should be banned at 14 weeks. Well, here I am as a pro-life legislator and talking about a 15 to 20-week ban because Democrats are at 24, Republicans are, some of them are at 0, 6, 12, 15, et cetera. 15 to 20 is somewhere in the middle. And I think how we talk about the issue, whether you're pro-life or pro-choice, many of us agree that there should be guardrails, there should be responsible guardrails, and we all agree on more than we disagree, more than likely.